Do a Pontiac, everybody said. Welcome back to Stay Tuned. I'm Tony Angelo. This is my YouTube channel, and we get to finally start making progress on my killer 74 Street Freak Firebird. It's the wildest car ever. It's super, super cool, and I bought it without an engine, and I finally found something perfect to go in there. If you think I sound fantastic, finally, it's because we picked up a couple of mics, and I cannot believe that, number one, the support has been awesome for the channel. Everyone is seemingly very stoked on all the stuff we've been doing, and I'm totally feeling the love. But the one big complaint is that we don't have mics, and the sound quality is awful. So we went out and bought a couple of very basic little lav packs. I'm wearing this thing, if you see this, and that's how we're doing it right now. I'll probably go to like a lapel thing later. But if it sounds good, let us know. If it doesn't, keep it to yourself, because I've heard it enough. All right, back to it. So I have bought what I think is perfect, but we're gonna talk Pontiac engines because I've never built one before, and I had to do a bunch of research to learn about these things because, you know, you don't wanna go out there and sound like a doofus. What we've got here is honestly the perfect motor because we're gonna build a supercharged engine, right? So we need good flow, we don't need a ton of compression, and we'd like to have some revability, which is not really the Pontiac thing. But let me explain what I've got here. This is a 1975 400. Okay, now you may think, ugh, smog motor, that sucks. But here's the deal with this one. I got it for 900 bucks. We don't know the shape of any of it, but it doesn't really matter. We're mostly into this thing for block heads, oil pans, some accessories, and the dipstick. So we've got that. It's time to tear it apart, and we can keep talking. I know it's very dirty, so let's start there. I think I'll pull the intake manifold off, get the exhaust manifolds off, and then sort of just start disassembling this thing. There's a ton, I might actually get the shop vac and suck up some of this grime. It's really gnarly. There's some bolts under there somewhere. So I'll start dropping some of my limited Pontiac knowledge on you. Number one rule of Pontiac engines. There's no big blocks and small blocks. So if you say big block and small block, you sound like a doofus. All the engines are externally the same, which is actually pretty cool because, you know, if you're swapping from a small block Chevy to a big block, you gotta buy different headers and some different accessories and all this sort of different stuff, but Pontiacs are all the same. You can take a 326 out and bolt a 455 in, and all your stuff's gonna work, which is pretty rad. Oh, thank God. Wow. All that old grease served to lubricate it, I think. It was in like a cocoon of funk. Get the funk out of my face. Get the funk out of my face. That sort of preserved it so it couldn't rust together. It's rare I see a motor so stock and old that it's got a cast iron intake on it, but this is one of them. You know, usually by the time we're messing with stuff, somebody's already put some kind of aftermarket intake on it. I don't know if this is stripped or just, there's not a lot of bolt left. That first one came out all right. It moved. It's so awesome that that happened on our first try and not the 5th time that we had to do this with movie magic. Booyah. Crushed it. Crushed it. I have vanquished you. sucker. Got all the intake manifold bolts off. That one was a real bear. It's all right, happens. All right, here we go. Yeah, there's just like a little gasket there. Oh my God, this thing's gonna give me a hernia. Wow. Oh. All right, not looking any better yet. I'm taking the valley pan off, which is just held on with two little bolts and probably a lot of old suction. And a gasket that has turned into cement. Oh, there she goes. And this will let us look at the camshaft. Oh boy. Okay. Not the greatest. You see all this gunk. It's just sludge, really, from not maintaining the thing. So far, I haven't found any real corrosion, which is like the real killer. You can see a little bit of light corrosion, but it's mostly so greasy and grimy that I don't know that it's hurt anything yet. One of the drawbacks of the Pontiac engines, they've got some really big strengths, is that, but one of the drawbacks is you can see this lifter valley is open, and this isn't very strong. As you can imagine, when you go crazy, solid, roller, hot, crazy, ramped up cams and stuff, these have a tendency to crack and break. These just aren't very well supported. A lot of engines have a ton more metal here supporting these lifter bores, and they don't have it, but there are some solutions to that. But that's one of the things. And then, this is just disgusting. We're just gonna keep cranking on, tearing it apart, but we're getting that shop back out because this is, God, this is the kind of chocolate cake you don't wanna eat.
Okay, but last time I didn't receive a piece.
There you go. See, that was a standard to metric conversion right there. It used to be 9/16. Now it's mostly 13 millimeter. Okay, cool. Beautiful, nice hunk of cast iron. You're looking at $1.50 right there at the scrap bin. All right, we've tossed the exhaust manifolds. That took forever. I want to see the bore on this engine so we know what size pistons to get and to see hopefully if this thing is like been worked over 40 times or not. If it's 30, 40, 60 over, we're not going to be thrilled about it. If it's standard or only like 10 over, we're talking about bore size, how much it's been overbored. We'll see if it's still very usable and pretty fresh. And because we're obviously going to have to cut some trash material out of these bores and make it work. All right. Not bad. Oh, yeah. All right, so we've got the cylinder heads off of our 400. This is all stock stuff here. These are stock cast pistons. So one thing we want to check here is the overbore. Usually these old motors have been rebuilt once or twice. We're hoping for as close to standard as possible. We'll probably have to, with this corrosion, go at least 30 over. I'm going to strip down these pistons and make sure that there's no markings on them that indicate that they're oversized. But the way this works is as you start getting bigger and bigger with your overbore, 30 over, 60 over, 90 over, you start to have issues with everything being in line. So there's something called core shift. So when they made this engine, you assume everything's perfectly centered, but sometimes things shift around a little bit. Your machine shop is going to cut these bores exactly where they're supposed to be, so if there's any shift as you get bigger and bigger, you're going to get towards the edge of usability and make this thing either potentially crack a cylinder or have issues with strength. So that's what you don't want to do. We're looking for the smallest bore possible, hopefully standard. So let's get in here and clean one up and look at it. Do a Pontiac, everybody said, right? I'm with you. Let's build a Pontiac. I think they're kick-ass motors. I think there's a lot of potential here. It would have been so much easier, cheaper, and cleaner to get a big block Chevy. They're falling off of trees and put one in here with a blower. But guess what? We're going on this Poncho road. I'm excited about it. Let's keep rocking. This thing's definitely stuck. We're going to pull it apart a little bit more and get that crankshaft out, pistons out, all that stuff. I'm going to pour a little ATF in all the cylinders that aren't very wet. Hopefully break up that stuck ring. I'm going to lay some in here in the lifter bores, hopefully free those up too. Fun fact about ATF, rotary guys love it. You can go, back in the day, let's say you found a first gen RX-7 and been sitting forever and fired up and smoked like it. Didn't want to run, didn't have any compression, but it was all together and it was put away properly, right? It just was sitting. What happened was the apex seals would get stuck in carbon, stay in there, never make any compression. You could show up, pour half a quart of ATF down the carburetor, rotate it over a few times, pay the man, wait an hour, fire it up, drive it home. Whew. All right, so I have all the lifters pushed up in their bores enough to pull the camshaft out, which was a bit of a fight. Again, we're trying not to break or crack the block around these bores. There's not a lot of material here, so I've got it out enough. We will get everything out of the way, and you can either tap them out from the inside or grab a puller and pull them up. But right now, I was going to just see if the motor will spin, or if it's still locked up. Yeah, you locked up tight. And that's okay. I'll pull the water pump, grab these pulleys off, get the damper off the front of this bad boy, and keep digging in. This water pump off. See, Pontiac uses these special mini bolts that they're very lightweight, they're super short, super easy to take them out. Front of this block's gonna look like a porcupine when the cover comes off. Cool. All right, so now we got the front cover, oil pan, and then we will fight this crankshaft pistons and rods out of this thing. We're getting there. We are about to be deep inside this thing.
That's what she said.
Ta-da. Okay. All right. Not really sure what's going on here, but let's tear it apart. Nope. Okay, cool. All right, let's start blasting pistons out. For all the problems, that's not the worst looking bearing I've ever seen. Just a well-used, long mile guy. He's all right. So we're going to make sure now, again, you know, spoiler alert, we're not using any of this stuff. We'll talk about the plan in a minute. But we are going to use the blocks. We want to make sure that when we're hammering this out, some of this stuff is very frozen, that we're not nicking the cylinder in a way that can't be fixed with a bore. So right down here, I'm just trying to make sure everything's lined up. And the top of this rod's not going to catch it. It did move a little bit for me. Okay, now it's safe. There she is. So I was able to rotate. A lot of the pistons are definitely very stuck, but Just trying to get this crankshaft out. And actually, generally it looks pretty good. Not that we're going to reuse it, but. So this just looks like a high miles motor that was not maintained. It's got sludge everywhere. Bearings look great. The deal with this thing is, and all Pontiac engines are this, some of them have 3-inch main bearings, which is too big essentially. And some of them have 3¼ inch main bearings, which is way too big. It was just sort of like bigger is better, I think, engineering philosophy back in the day. But really with regards to bearing speed, so when you have a 3-inch main bearing, the outside of that bearing is spinning much faster than, say, a 2¼ inch bearing, like 2 points on a record, right? And so it's one of the reasons why these motors don't exactly love to rev. The bearing speed just gets way too crazy. So the reason I picked this 400 is that it's essentially the biggest bore casting. It's a 4.21 bore stock. So it's essentially a big bore motor with the small bearing size. It's the small journal size. So sort of the best block, in my opinion, to build this motor is this one. And I got the last of the good engines. This one ends in 988. And in 1975, they actually made a switch mid-year to a 557 block. And look, there's a lot of talk with Mopar 400, stuff like that. Like, it's thin web, there's more nickel in it, blah, blah, blah. And some people like that, there's no big deal. It is a big deal. In the Pontiacs, it's a big deal. It's like a specific thing they did. They took a bunch of the strength out of the webbings to make a low weight engine block, which is like something you don't want to put a whole bunch of horsepower through. In fact, they even brought back the 988 casting in like 77 and 78 for some of the Trans Ams. Probably Burt Reynolds made a call or something. It was like, I need some, Bandit needs some power. So they did get some hot boy blocks later, but this is essentially the last of the good Pontiac V8s. And we got one. We got the ugliest, grossest one, but we got one. All right, I'm gonna break these heads down. These are again the 6X heads, which means they have decent port size, decent flowing head. It's got a 211-inch intake valve, 166 exhaust valve. There was a head with a bigger exhaust valve, 177, which I think you could modify and put these in. I'm not sure if that's worth it for us. But we're just gonna tear these apart, take them over, get hot tanked. They have the 100cc chamber, which is gonna get us in a nice neighborhood to make the compression about 9-to-1. That's what we're going for with the pistons we're gonna set up. And you can tell that by looking, there's a little pad here. Like I said, 8, 6, or 4. 8 is 100, 4 is 80 something, and 6 is 130, and you don't want to use it. And it doesn't have the good thread-in stud. So this is a great head for us to use. It's got a ton of broken off exhaust studs. So I'm gonna send it out to get a hot tank. We'll bring it back, we'll try to fix it. So we have finally got this rusty, crusty, nasty 400 totally apart. It's gonna go to the machine shop now, get hot tanked. They're gonna sonic check the bore. They're gonna magnum flux the whole thing, make sure it is ready to rock, because this thing is getting a complete Butler stroker kit, forged crank, their rods, their custom pistons they have made just for them. It's going to be like a 461. It's going to be an absolute animal. And we're going to do a bunch of different things to strengthen it up. Billet main caps. There's going to be this brace to run along here to strengthen up this lifter valley. And just make sure this thing is ready to kill. So that's it. 1975 Pontiac 400, the early ones, the 988 block. I'm telling you, it's like the perfect cheap 400 to make a whole bunch of horsepower, because we've got the 6X heads with the big valves and the 100cc chambers and the 3-inch main bearings here. And the only thing we need to do, believe it or not, to make this thing a 461 as far as clearance, because the 455 is the same essential motor, is there's a little bit of grinding you do in one spot. The crankshaft clears, this thing will be ready to kill. Next time you see it, we're gonna go down to the machine shop, see how it's going, and get ready to assemble this thing. All right, that's it for this episode of Stay Tuned. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you guys soon. Peace.